Good morning, everybody. This is Bevo.
And I'm Robert Rostick.
I'm Bevo. Welcome to this week's episode of Raising Unmanageables, episode 62. Robert Rostick.
Yes, sir.
Who do we have on the set today?
I thought it was your turn. I so thought it was your turn. I know we have Mason Guerin producing.
We have Mason Guerin producing. Behind the camera, we have Alex Zadarozny, our intern, our film student, bringing all the young energy into the studio right now. So welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming back. Thank you, Mason, for being here as well. And Robert Rostick.
You always throw it on me.
I know.
Always, but hey, I'm prepared. No matter what you throw, I'm
had
good.
to throw you off today, man.
I'm good, man. I'm good.
I'm glad you're good.
So
we got a great topic to talk about today.
What are we talking about today?
Well, I think we should continue our conversation from earlier and talk a little more in detail about as creatives, who are we attracting as our clientele or potential clientele?
And sometimes, especially with new creatives, we don't necessarily know who that is. We
Right.
haven't defined that. So the idea, first of all, is to define who you want to attract.
Right.
Then find out about your messaging, who you are actually attracting. So how do we go about it?
I don't know. I think it's a couple, based off the conversation we had earlier, I think there's a couple different layers to it.
Okay.
Right? So there's just the technical approach of being a creative and going through that process as a marketer or a designer or someone from our advertising background. But then I'm really noticing that a lot of it might just play based on who you are as a person.
Oh, absolutely.
Who are you showing up as? How do you talk? How do you present yourself? How do you present information? How do you present ideas? What's your voice sound like? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it high? Is it low? All those things I think are giving people information about how to interact with you or if they want to interact with you, right? And then
Absolutely.
we have this whole process of let's turn it into this technical thing on paper as far as advertising and marketing goes.
So oftentimes, in order to figure out who you're marketing to, look at your friends.
Right.
Look at the people that are around you,
Right.
that surround you, the people that give you the positive affirmation, the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis where you're not selling them something as far as your idea or your creativity. Then you'll find that pretty much those are the people that are going to be somewhat your client.
Right.
And I think that sometimes we like to dismiss that.
Because they're our friends?
Yeah, because they're our friends. And if we're going about it as a individual and not a giant corporation,
Right.
then those are the people that we generally attract. People that look and sound like our friends, because our friends accept us for who we are.
Right.
And the people that are not our friends out there, that are soon to be our clients, will accept us that same way.
That's the interesting part, because being in advertising all these years, my mind most times goes directly towards let's figure out who you're for. Us as a creative or us as a client, right? When I meet with a client in the advertising agency situation, I'm trying to figure out who that work is going to go out to.
Yes. Yeah.
Who are they for? But a lot of times we don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out in this smaller small business realm,
Right.
why they're coming to us in the first place. You know what I mean? And part of our conversation earlier today was based on the fact that no matter what situation I'm in, no matter what scenario, whether I'm talking to a group of people or I'm just having a conversation with family, friends, or whoever, most of the people who gravitate towards me and my if it's a message or my conversations or the things I like to talk about, they usually tend to be in this area of 35, 40-ish to about 60 years old. Those are the people that hear what I'm saying.
And do you know why those people, that particular group is listening to you.
You were explaining this earlier, but I want you to explain it again because I know I won't explain it the same way you did. So please tell me,
Well,
explain that again.
I mean, taking it in is that whenever you talk to someone, you're talking to them based upon where you are in life at that time,
Mm-hmm.
your experiences, and your interactions, and people who can relate to those interactions and those experiences tend to be around the age range given about 10 to 15 years plus or minus where you are.
Mhm.
And so those are the people that are going to hear your voice, especially when you're offering them something as far as a service. Now, if you are a point where you're scolding someone, then the only people that are going to hear your voice are going to be 20 to 30 years below you. And that's if you're scolding them, because they're going to look up to you as your father-like figure. But as far as a person that's selling a product or selling an idea or selling a service, the people that are going to hear you most are going to have the experiences that you have, the journey that you've taken that's going to resonate with them because that's a memory to them,
Okay.
and they're going to buy your services.
Yeah, I found that interesting because there are times where it's the same message overall,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And we were talking about before where I'm not specifically, I don't go outside and I hold up a sign that says, hey, I'm only talking to this group of people and you
Mhm.
got to be this old and blah, blah, blah. I don't have a sign for that like stamped on my forehead or I don't carry one around. However, that group of people is the one that gravitate.
Mhm. Sure.
And what we came to a couple different conclusions, like you said before, is that age group in that 25 to 30, before 35 age group, they have a different frame of reference,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And they need a different type of help. They need the same type of help, but just it's coming at a different time,
Mhm.
right? So they're understanding what type of help they want differently, and they want help from a perspective where they're already working in that space or that time,
Sure.
right? And we mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk again, and we were talking about. You asked me how does he make his money,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of he runs an advertising agency
Yeah.
based in a lot of entertainment, sports, music. So he's kind of
I'm
already
going to tell you right now,
locked
his
into
demographics is going to be the
Right.
younger audience.
right,
I mean,
right,
music, sports,
right.
those type of things, trendy clothes. Those are going to be the younger
Right,
audience.
right, and he knows that.
Yes.
So he stays there, and everything he talks about stays in that audience, stays in that realm. All the way he moves social media stays in that realm. So there's
Mhm.
not a disconnection between a thing he says over here and a thing on Monday, and then something he says over here on Friday. There's always the same. He's always speaking to a certain crowd.
Right.
Now, again, you mentioned there are some people that may be older that gravitate towards this message,
Mhm.
but it's fewer because of the fact that they have to kind of understand that where that message is coming from,
That's correct.
right? So I think I'm on that other side of that spectrum where now there's people who they're older. They have children who are in high school or getting out of high school. They're in college, going to college, and they put their lives on hold for them, or they've kind of slowed things down for them, and they understand things from a different perspective. They're understanding things from this. I have 40 more years to go. I
Yeah.
have 50 more years
Yeah.
to go.
They're
Let me
reaching
figure
around
out.
40 at that point, so they got 40 more. Yeah,
Right.
you're right.
Right. So they've already played with the first 40,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whether or not they got that right, they want to get it right on the next 40.
Right.
Right.
And they have now gained a sense of what time actually means,
Right.
because to get to 40 it takes no time.
Right.
So the older you get, the faster it goes,
And the less time you have.
and the less time you have.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the people that are actually hear you because they are in the same boat as you are.
Right.
Whereas the 20, 25-year-old, I mean, they have infinite amount of time. In fact, they will live until they're 140 in their mind.
In their mind.
In their mind.
Right. Because they think time's forever.
Yeah, time is forever
Right.
to them.
So is there a way, just to bring it in context, is there a way to talk backwards or talk into those different demographics without it being forced or without it being
Sure.
stepping outside of the realm of being unauthentic.
Well, yeah, there is. I mean, let's take a look at alcohol and cigarettes. Uh, they're 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 being forbidden to the younger crowd. So anytime you tell somebody they can't have something, then they'll want it.
Hmm.
Uh, in fact, if your message is that guys, my services are not for you, and they'll say the hell it is.
Right.
They'll find a way to get that, and then if it does fit their needs, then they'll stay with it.
Okay.
But what you have to do is you have to speak to that audience. You have to speak to them at their place of play, high school, gyms, the after school programs. You have to show up, show them what it is you're doing, and to prepare them for when they do have an opportunity to utilize your services. And what I mean by your services, it means your expertise. Then they will show up to you because you're the only person that showed up to them.
So going where your market is,
Yeah.
and no matter if I wanted to be in, if I wanted to be in that certain age group, I need to go where they are.
You need to go where they are. It doesn't mean you need to change who you are.
I just need to go where they are
Yeah.
and present
Now,
the same message.
let's talk about a mission statement just for a brief second. A mission statement, which is a defining set of words that says this is what you are,
Okay.
and this is what you represent, and this is what you're about. And to take that mission statement to anybody and everybody does not change who you are. It sets a foundation to the people that are hearing you, what you are and what you're about. And to go into these particular, and let me call them neighborhoods of young people, to define that statement and then show them how that statement is relevant to them as to where they are now and where they're going to be in the future. I think you can then expand your audience.
Right.
Because as always, there are going to be some people who didn't know about this kind of what you do in your services are going to ask themselves the question, okay, hey, is this for me? Because I'm deciding a career path. And in deciding that Brian Valentine said that day back 8 years ago, I wonder if he's still around. Because I think I might want to work for him or intern with him. But if you don't take the message to them, then you can't expect them to come to you.
Okay. Yeah, and it starts to make sense too. And Mason has a question. It starts to make sense because when I look at, there's one place where that demographic kind of gets split. Where when I'm at the school as the coach, portfolio coach, where I'm at SPC for the portfolio coaching quarter. Sometimes there's 20-year-olds in there. Sometimes there's 35-year-olds in there. Sometimes they're in between there, or maybe fewer older people. So I spend a lot of time trying to make sure the stuff that I'm saying to them is resonating because they're about to get out of school into this whole other world where they're trying to get a job that's going to that they've been working towards. Right, they want to get out of the job of being a server or working at that fast food restaurant or working at this bar or whatever the hell they're doing now to put them through school. They want to get this job doing this thing that we've been coaching them towards. And a lot of the times, it feels like I'm tweaking that message a little bit to talk to a certain demographic, to talk to a younger. Not really younger adult, but a younger adult, and versus an older adult. I feel like that there's an ease there when I'm talking to an older adult because we're talking more about they've already been through the experience and that rush.
They're ready to have the action.
Right.
Take the action forward.
Right. But then the younger, it's kind of calming things down a little bit and getting them prepared for what's next, and then talking about how to execute on it versus, like you just said, the older person. A lot of times they've already been through it. So they're like, what do I do right now to set me up for later? And they understand though too, they understand that there's time and there's things take time. They usually don't have to have it done tomorrow.
Right. They understand that in order for quality to happen, they have to put some investment in. And that investment usually is time.
Right. Mason Guerin, hit us up.
I don't even remember what I think I was going to talk about perspective, that um, working with people who are your normal clientele, and
Yeah.
then if you need to shift what you do and shift your services and whatnot, is just take into an account the perspective that those people are at. So if it's a younger generation or even an older generation, or a different demographic, of
Mhm.
just taking that into account. It's like, as an artist, as a painter, what how I want to present myself as a painter
Yeah.
is one way, but then I love working with kids and talking about art and teaching them about drawing or painting, but it's very much different than if I want to work with adults who don't want to be professional artists, but I just want to push the, hey, every day you should be creative and it's a good, healthy thing that you should do. I always have to be very mindful about how I talk about art, because it can very much exclude people and alienate and whatever.
Yeah, and
So,
that's a valid point too, and I think it's important, especially for artists, to think about, because I think it's easy when you're a designer, if you're an illustrator, if you're a not really an illustrator but designer, a photographer. Um, Other industries have a this is who this is for. We may have sneakers, but what type of sneakers is it? It's this type might not be for this crowd of people, but artists a lot of times don't think about who their work is for,
Sure, that's
right?
correct.
And they're not walking in the rooms and evaluating those rooms and saying, out of the people who's already bought my work
Mhm.
and the people who buy my work and show up to view my work
Right.
and to inquire about my work,
Mhm.
what do those people look like? And then they let me build a persona or archetype around that person, and then let me put myself in these rooms with people who look like that, behave like that, have the same spending habits as that. What do they need? What's provoking that spending habit? Is it
Mhm.
do they need more of a relationship
Right.
before they buy? Is it more of a it's right now? Are they more trendy and they buy things because they've been influenced by their surroundings? Like what emotion is triggering the 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 purchase of your work, right? And that's not an obvious thing for artists to do a lot of the times.
Well, I think sometimes though, as mentors, as you mentioned that uh, that you train and teach people over at the local college, is that I think that mentors leave too much on the table to invite the people into their space. I used to teach at a couple of local
Say that
colleges
again.
around.
Say that one more time.
Well, you leave it on the table uh, by not inviting people into your space.
Okay.
You're training, you're mentoring them, but you're not inviting them to you. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn. But once I learned it, I practice it all the time. I will tell people after giving a talk, I'll say,
Mhm.
look, we have a camera club meeting. I'd like to invite you out and see what we do.
Mhm.
Well, I'm shooting this job next Sunday. If you'd like to come along,
Mhm.
then show up.
Yeah.
And what you're going to do is you're going to get people that will show up once there's an invitation, because I don't want people to see me only as a trainer.
Right.
I want people to see me as the person who actually produces the work.
Right.
So I invite people constantly now
Okay.
to be a part of my world.
Yeah, that's actually terrifying for me with regard to even just working with Alex. I'm like, the most terrifying thing is for me not to have something for her to do. I'm like, because then I'm just like, right? So like, I want to be learning from my situation so that so we can meet and I have things to teach her or things that we can talk about and be present for her to ask questions, whether she needs them or not. You know what I mean? Is that kind of the
Well,
same thing
yeah, well,
or
let's face it now. Even if you worked in an office 8 hours
right?
a day, how
Right.
much work do you actually do? About 3 hours worth of
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
and then the rest of the time is twiddling your thumbs or having a water cooler
Mhm.
talk about whatever the local politics or what's happening in
Yeah.
town. So there's very little work that actually gets done, and sometimes it's good that people see that there's no work,
Right.
and when there is no work, that's the time to talk about what it is you actually will do.
Mhm.
Catch up on your taxes, billing, all the things that are not the sexy part
Right.
of artistry. And when people see that, it's like they can then make it a real decision
Hmm.
rather than to go back and say, hey, I hung out and all these things happen. Well, they don't happen every day that way.
Right.
And that's why I invite people into the Camera Club, because it's an introduction into what it is I do.
Hmm.
I'll have 5 or 10 minutes worth of teaching, and then I'll actually start doing stuff. And then there's a lot of downtime where other people will take over and do things.
Right.
But my point is to invite them into the space and let that space be a realistic space.
Got you. So I think my biggest takeaway, or what I'm getting from this conversation, is, or what I hope other people are getting from this conversation is, it's a lot of what you're bringing to the table
Sure.
on a consistent basis.
Yes.
And it's less of what you're going to sell to them
Mm-hmm.
and it's always more about what you're going to do for them.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly what you are going to do for them,
For them.
in order to help them understand what it is that they can do for you.
Right. So it's still just that whole thing of, it's super repetitive, this whole thing, right? Of show up
Yes, sure.
and
That's basically
show up
it.
as yourself
Mhm.
as much as possible. And if you feel like you're not showing up as yourself, practice. I think you can practice. We talked about,
yeah.
is it cool or is it disingenuous to craft yourself? But I think it is important that if you're not good in certain places or in certain areas, to be able to sit down and focus on that and say, you know what, I want to get better at this. I want to
Sure.
get better at looking people in the face and shaking their hand and presenting myself. That was a thing for me, getting into business. It was more of I didn't feel like I belonged in those spaces until I learned everything there was to know about those spaces. But then you got to go into those spaces to learn the shit, right? So you got to go out there and shake the hands and look into people's face and say, hey, I'm here. I really don't know what the hell I'm doing here right now, but I'm probably going to learn something. Hopefully I do by the time I leave. So I think you can practice and craft and put yourself in these situations where they're not just beneficial for yourself, but they're going to always benefit the people around you, and those are going to be the people who are going to be supporting you anyway. So
Yeah, I think there's a strong need to be self-aware
mhm,
about what you want to do, how you present yourself,
Mhm.
and if you don't have that awareness, or maybe you're unsure, find some close friends who can be brutally honest with you.
right,
And then and are you willing to do what it takes to take yourself to the next level of being able to do all the things that you need to be doing, like
Yeah.
speaking in public if that's needed. I think that you definitely should have a pretty wide range of skills and whatnot, but I think that's important. And that kind of self-awareness will be able to take you to different demographics or people that you want to work with
yeah,
as well.
The letter R, the letter that comes right before the letter S, what comes comes before the letter S, R. That's the one I'm looking for.
okay,
When I was a kid, and I would listen to radio, I would notice that the radio signals that we were getting were out of Chicago.
okay,
And I would listen to this radio, and I noticed that they would say the letter R differently than the way I was saying it.
Mm.
I was saying aura.
Mm.
I was like, aura. So I actually went out one day and I said to my friends from Montgomery, Alabama, in the South, is aura okay?
Mm.
And they would say, yeah, aura is okay. And Jack is too. Jack's okay too. I said, no, aura. Is the letter aura okay? And yeah, aura is okay. And Sue and Sally is too. And I'm saying that, okay, if they're hearing that 2 syllables, something's wrong. Till one day, someone said to me, who was not from Montgomery, Alabama, they were actually from Michigan, said to me when I said the word, they said, how do you spell your name? I said, Aura, Ostick. And they said, what was the first letter? That started me just making a change in the way I said the letter R. Just that alone changed my whole voice outlet. And I said, I never want to be known as the guy from Montgomery, Alabama, based on my speech.
Right.
So yes, you can change your identity.
You can change it. You
can
can
craft it.
craft little pieces
Yeah.
of it that goes towards who you are
Yeah, absolutely.
and builds on your authenticity. So
That's kind of how it works. I know the letter aura.
I didn't know we was gonna get to aura today.
Yeah.
Our rustic.
Aura rustic.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that that's like completely a Southern thing too.
Oh, it is.
Oh, yeah.
It is a Southern thing.
Yeah.
But I knew that the job that I was eventually going to do was going to take me around the world.
Right.
And I did not want to be known as that guy who said aura. And that was a personal thing.
Robert Rostick, you always find the best way for us to end these episodes. So we'll end this on aura. And I want to thank everybody out there who still is rocking with us, who is spreading the message and the word about unmanageables. Thank you very much. Keep sharing, keep liking, keep commenting, and we'll talk to you next week.
So I need to know, are you unmanageable? Take some time out of your day, every day, to be unmanageable.
Appreciate it, guys.